GPstrategies.com. So now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Steve Swink. Steve has been with GP Strategies for over 7 years, delivering and supplementing both instructor-led training and virtual training. He also worked in adult learning for over 17 years, serving in various roles at area community colleges, developing and delivering customized software training programs. Previously, he developed and delivered a product education and sales training program for a major regional health insurer. He holds both bachelor's and master's degrees in business administration from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And as a thought leader in the industry, Steve is a frequent contributor to the GP Strategies blog, and his article is now The Time to Move on MOOCs, appeared in Chief Learning Officer magazine. So with that, Steve, I'm going to turn presenter rights over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kayla, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here today. We all know that change is taking place at an increasingly rapid pace in the world around us, and our training materials and events must change as well. In her book, Rookie Smarts, Liz Wiseman states that a critical skill of the 21st century is not what you hold in your head, but the ability to tap into and access what other people know. She goes on to say that the best leaders and fastest learners know how to harness collective intelligence. That's something we'll want to do here today, leveraging the chat and Q&A panels, along with our follow-up blog post on this topic. So why synergy? Perhaps an even more fundamental reason to put this into place and deliver synergy in our events comes from a quote by the first century Greek philosopher Plutarch, saying that the mind is not simply a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. If you keep this thought in mind, along with the fact that IBM research is predicting that very soon human knowledge will double once every 12 hours, this makes an even more compelling reason to put synergy into our learning experiences and move them beyond simple data dumps. So what is synergy? Let's take a look at the definitions here about how it works, how it can be applied in the workplace, and at least one reason to make synergy a key component of any learning experience. Wikipedia defines synergy as the creation of a whole that is greater than the simple sum of its parts. Barb Rettenbach, in her 2009 work called Synergy, says that the design beauty of synergy is that it serves only to add and to never subtract. And in Stephen Covey's classic work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he highlights the exponential payoffs of synergizing, or habit number 6. So, how synergistic are learning experiences today? We want to go ahead and put out our first poll right now and ask you that question. How synergistic are training events that you've participated in, whether it be as a designer, someone who facilitated the event, or even as a learner? Are they truly synergistic? You'll see the 4 options that are out there. We'd like you to go ahead and vote on those. And also, because we want this event to be synergistic, we also encourage you to put your comments in the chat panel if you have something that the poll does not address.
So, Steve, looks like we have most of the participants have given their answers. We're going to go ahead and give it about 20 more seconds to go ahead and put in your thoughts and your answers. Again, as Steve mentioned, you can also add your thoughts to the chat panel, and then we'll go ahead and show those results.
Okay, so middle of the road pretty much, some collaborative or occasional spurts of synergy. I'm glad to see that very few are saying that not at all synergistic, one way only. That is encouraging as well. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the concepts behind putting synergy into learning events. The pieces we're going to talk about today are all alliterative. If you look at the chart and the graph there on this slide, you'll see that they all begin with the letter C. The three key pieces we're going to talk about are content, curation, and cultivation. Some other C's we'll occasionally refer to as well include collaboration, which you see going around the cycle there, as well as context, which is in the center of it, and then community and or continuation. So let's take a little closer look at the definitions of these three basic C's. Content, again, is the information that's actually there, used as the base for the knowledge transfer. Curation is the ongoing process of collecting this data and filtering it and making it presentable in a way that's relevant to the community. And then cultivation is developing and growing or progressing through this process as well. Now, as we look at these definitions here, as the discussion continues, and again, we encourage your comments in the chat panel, we may find that these definitions change somewhat throughout our discussion today, or perhaps even radically as we continue this discussion on through other media moving forward. The other C's that we're going to be seeing woven through this discussion are collaboration, which is the lifeblood of the process, and context, or the boundaries or environment in which it is set up. So let's go ahead and talk about content now in just a little more detail. First from a design perspective, then from a delivery point of view. A truly synergistic experience should be designed from the ground up. We should have this information out here available to us to be able to build that again from the very starting point. So to get your participants' neurons firing, you want to create spark or trigger questions that will engage participants from the outset, perhaps even before the actual event begins. This could be accomplished by putting trigger items into pre-work assignments, or if the event doesn't have pre-work, teaser emails or other communications. And then when it's time to actually deliver the experience, good design is a start, but the facilitators are going to need to be flexible enough to work in the moment as the energy starts to flow and improvise as the case may be. Trainers are now going to be conductors more so than leaders or lecturers. And depending on the ultimate intended outcome of the event, you want to let the participants do as much of the driving as possible, where the facilitator is to fuel that fire that Plutarch spoke of, ideally using participant-generated review items and discussion points, and then when necessary, steering the group back toward its desired final outcome. Curation, as we mentioned, is basically the culling, collecting, filtering, and organizing of content from a variety of sources. For today's discussion, we'll want to focus on the information that's coming from the participants themselves and what they bring to the table. Some examples of tools that can be leveraged include group chats from instant messaging tools, whether it be Link, Skype, things of those natures, SharePoint discussion boards, internal or external or public social media tools, and even basic old-school time-tested examples of components such as flip chart journals. And as Kayla mentioned earlier, this webinar is also being recorded. That's another example of curation as well. As we mentioned earlier, cultivation is the nurturing and ongoing growth of participants in a learning experience. So one of the first things we want to consider for cultivation is deciding which platform or platforms to leverage for collaboration. The activities should be creative and inherently designed to solicit input from the participants. We want to draw them in actively whenever we can. Any curriculum or course maps that are put together should have free time built into them with productive frameworks for participant input built in as well. Then from a delivery perspective, cultivation is more with the follow-through. This is what we want to do to keep the learning experience alive after the main learning event ends. This can be accomplished with tools such as periodic mind boosters and reminders that are either emailed or broadcast to the participants, community chat rooms and bulletin boards, and peer-to-peer rating systems that rank the relevant points of interest to the community. When we take all three of these components, and again, as you'll look at the illustration, collaboration is key, making sure that everyone is actively involved. Synergy will come together when we put content, curation, and cultivation in there. The participants now become the catalyst for creating that truly synergistic learning experience. So let's take a look at some example tactics of things that can be done to create and deliver that synergistic learning experience. As we mentioned previously, this recording, the blog post, both the previous one to this event and the follow-ups are all examples of ways to keep the event alive. The blog post will allow you and other visitors to comment on it as well. Other options include the social media components that we've already talked about, such as SuccessFactors Jam, Yammer. There's Tribe Social as well that can be used. And there are also something we call dartboards. These are basically made up of web conferencing whiteboards where you have discovery questions that are designed to pique participants' interest, encourage research and exploration. A collaborative activity, something that can be as simple as a crossword puzzle or a word find that brings and pulls people together surrounding the topic. Riddles that test the brain and possibly encourage critical thinking, and a trivia question that can be just for fun, and it may or may not be related to the topic at hand. So what is the payoff of synergy? As we saw earlier, Stephen Covey talked about the payoff of synergy with people coming together. Management guru Ken Blanchard has also said that none of us is smart as all of us. So the goal of most corporate and other organizational learning experiences is to drive results, whether it be improved customer service, more efficient operations, a better competitive advantage, or even social or cultural behavioral change. So if we involve participants from the outset, then throughout and beyond the initial learning event, the learning experience, that will greatly increase the likelihood that they will apply what was learned, share it with others, and affect a lasting positive change. So as we start to wrap up today's session, we have another poll for you. We would like to know, what do you feel is the most important area on which to focus when developing a synergistic learning experience? In the poll itself, we've given you three choices among the three main C's we spoke of today: content, curation, and cultivation. Additional options also include none or all of the above. If you chose one of these two, we would encourage you to please share that with us. Give us your comments in the chat panel. We don't want to restrict this discussion just to the poll, but at the same time, we want to give you a framework around it. So Kayla has the poll opened up. If you want to go ahead and vote on that, we also encourage your comments within the chat panel as well.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we've got about 15 seconds left in this poll, so go ahead and put in your answers. Most people have responded, and there's definitely a clear winner. I'm sure you can guess which one that is. We'll go ahead and give the poll results here in a few seconds.
All right, all of the above, 3 out of 4, 75% chose that. It's split evenly between content and curation and cultivation. So I think we're seeing a bit of a trend here in terms of talking about putting all the pieces together, but also the fact that cultivation came in a distant second, the ongoing information as well of keeping the learning event alive. Yes, and a great comment here. Cultivation will make the other two C's more valuable. So we certainly thank you for that. By the way, the comments that are coming into the chat panel, Kayla and I can see those, but others cannot. We will put these comments out on the blog as well.
Yep.
So any other comments?
If I can add another thought in there, we just had one come in that says, in order for the model to work, importance should be placed on all of the areas. Good.
Yes, very good. So yes, if Kayla may be seeing some. I just happen to see the one to all panelists. If you're sending it to the host, Kayla will have those. So yes, there should be an equal emphasis, and when we saw the poll results there, that was certainly a key component of it as well. So we've got one more slide to talk about before we open it up for Q&A, and again, harnessing around the ideas of the C's. We've talked about the three main C's that we saw in the poll, but we also want to talk about context a little bit, the component of setting the framework. Another C that's not listed here could be chaos. We want to live on the edge of chaos, so the context has to be there. Crowdsourcing, where we draw information from our participants and the community. So we certainly appreciate the comments and questions that are coming in here as well. And then collective new insights, information that we're getting from you even now as well. So in the time we've had here together today, we've discussed some starter thoughts and ideas around bringing more synergy to the learning experiences, as well as some ideas from you. And we certainly want to encourage these to continue on the blog post and through the Twitter and other social media channels as well. So 3 key takeaways, perhaps, that we can talk about. You may have others, and we certainly encourage those also. 1, collaboration is key for buy-in and continuation. Obviously, people want to have that sense of ownership. We can learn as much from our participants as they can from us. That was seen today with some of the comments that we've seen coming into the panel. And then for learning to be truly synergistic, it must live on beyond the static classroom event. So in terms of synergizing this event, I'm going to turn it back over to Kayla. And Kayla, I'm going to ask you if you will talk about our social media options and how this discussion will continue.
Yeah, so thanks, Steve, for that great presentation and to keep the synergy going. Steve he's such a great thought leader and always offering his any knowledge, and he's so willing to share it. And so we will be posting a new blog, again, going over the key takeaways and some of the highlights from the questions that we received today. That will go on our blog. We'll have that posted Monday, June 1st. We'll have that ready for you. The link will be included in this PowerPoint deck that you'll also receive in the email. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are always encouraging conversations on our Twitter channel at GP Corp, and this particular webinar will be using the hashtag GPWebinar. And also on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, in LinkedIn there will be a group. We have Exploring Learning Trends. That's also hyperlinked here in this slide deck. That will, we encourage you to talk with other thought leaders in the industry around conversations like we had today. And then you can also share your thoughts and share presentations on SlideShare. So that wraps up for today. We'll go ahead and start talking about any questions that have come in. Excuse me. And as you noticed, Steve covered a lot in 20 minutes. We still have a lot to discuss. His information is on this final slide, and will also be included in the blog post that we'll send out on Monday. The recording and the slides will also be sent to the email address you provided. And it does look like we have a few questions coming in. I'll go ahead and start going through those. At the beginning, Steve, you mentioned a book, and a few people have asked about that, so I'll just go ahead and say that again. The book Steve referred to is Rookie Smarts by Liz Wiseman. We'll include that in the blog post follow-up so that everyone has a link to that as well. And then, let's see. Here's a question. You've shared some great tips pertaining to social and collaborative learning for blended and instructor-led learning. Do you recommend any specific methods to create synergy in web-based e-learning?
Okay, so web-based e-learning, again, if we go back with the design, certainly seek participant input. I've actually been involved with a client or two where their subject matter experts are actually doing some of the voices, and avatars are created around those individuals. So sometimes, depending on your community, those can be individuals that are recognized there to create some synergy. Community buy-in is certainly part of that as well. And that's more to come on that in the blog, but those are my initial thoughts. That's a very good question.
Great. Another question is, let's see, are learning management systems a good platform to host informal learning as well as formal?
They can be. Success factors, the JAM option that we mentioned earlier, that's something that's built in to Success Factors platform. There are other LMSs that have social media tools embedded as well so that people can collaborate and contribute, and you can get your curation there as well.
Great. We're over by about a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and take one more question. If you do have questions, though, be sure to keep adding them in here. We will address them in the blog post that everyone will receive on Monday. So this last question before we wrap it up, how would you recommend I start encouraging a culture of collaboration within my teams? Right now our initiatives are fairly siloed.
Okay, so there is an article that's out there by the Harvard Business Review, and we'll post a link to that on the blog as well, that gives 8 tips. The one tip that resonated with me was the idea of developing role clarity but task ambiguity. In other words, give people individual roles when they're working on a project or learning event, but give them the latitude on how they're going to approach those roles. But there are 8 tips, and we will include the link to that article in the blog.
Great, thanks. I know there are some questions we did not get to address, so again, because we're over on time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the session for today, but be on the lookout for our email on Monday, and that will include a link to that blog post where we will address any of the questions we did not get to. I want to say thank you again to today's speaker, Steve Swink, and thanks everyone who attended for your time and attention. We hope that you'll join us again for our next session, Assess or Unleash How Pioneering Firms Are Rethinking Their Approach to Performance Management. This will be at the end of June. And so for GP Strategies, I'm Kayla Roth, and I wish everyone a great day.